G'day and welcome to the Choosing Your Uni Virtual Expo. I'm Rob Malicki, your host for this session, and today we are diving deep on the University of Technology, Sydney. But before we do so, I'd first like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I stand and work and live. That's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'm grateful to everything that culture has done to look after this land for such a long time. Now, before we get started, I just want to let you know what's coming up in the next 20 minutes. And firstly, hello if you are joining me live here today. If you've got questions, comments, drop them in the chat regardless of which platform you're working or looking from. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, whichever ones you're at, or on the Expo Hub itself. Drop your questions in and I will try to get to them. If I don't manage to get to your questions here live, and this also goes for those of you watching on the recording, you can jump in the Discord community, Choosing Your Uni Discord community, where I will be answering every question that comes through, including the ones I don't get to. And also, if you're watching this on the recording, you can join those communities to have, regardless of whether it's like a personal question or a very broad general question, I'll make sure that we get to everything. So, without further ado, let's talk about what's coming up here. We're going to be talking about what the University of Technology is known for. We're going to be talking about its academic strengths. We're going to be hearing from a couple of students who have studied there. We're obviously going to be looking at things like the rankings that are going on, and we're going to dive deep on the hard data. And by that, I mean things like student satisfactions, graduate salaries, graduate employment rates, and of course, rankings. There's something to say about rankings. I have a caveat about rankings that we'll get to. And I make a promise to you that I'm going to be really straight with you about what the numbers mean and how it potentially impacts you. We're going to try and get behind the hype. At the end, I'm going to also tell you which institutions I would personally compare UTS against. Of course, this is a very broad comment. It's not about subject-specific areas, but it's just to help you build your shortlist. So once again, if you're watching live, drop your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them. If you're on the replay, jump into the Choosing Your Uni Discord and we will make sure we get those questions answered for you. All right. Now, before we get started, this whole event is being made possible by our major presenting sponsor, Southern Cross University. A quick word from them and then we're going to get straight into the details.
One day soon, I'm going to be the boss.
And I'm going to teach and empower the next generation.
One day soon, I'll use science to save the planet.
And one day soon, I'll save lives.
Right now, I'm ready to take the first step.
No matter what your goal, choose a pathway at Southern Cross University to transform your future.
Okay, UTS, ranked 96th in the world, which is inside the top 100. But what makes it impressive is the fact that it only became a university in 1988. Honestly, that makes it younger than most of the cars that your parents learned to drive on. And what's interesting is that it's climbed faster than almost any Australian university in the rankings. So who is UTS actually for? Let's be honest about that. And maybe I'll start by saying like who it's not for. Firstly, probably the obvious one. UTS probably isn't for you if you're looking for that big sandstone campus, huge lawns, lots of old buildings, and research intensiveness. UTS, in the heart of the city, is a vertical glass and concrete campus, but it is right in the heart of the city. So if your idea of uni involves sprawling green spaces, you might actually feel a little bit boxed in at UTS and want to look at a different campus. It's also probably not for you if you're looking for an educational experience that's highly theoretical. It does have like some extraordinary areas of research strength, but if theory is more your thing, then UTS as a very applied institution may not be the right ticket for you. However, if you like the ideas of doing internships, industry placements, clinical placements, then this could actually be a really good choice. Now, lastly, also a fairly obvious one, particularly if you're already living in Sydney. Sydney is very expensive. One of the most expensive cities in the world. If you're an international student, living here is quite costly. So if you're looking for a cheaper place to live, a slower pace of life, UTS may not be the option for you. But before I tell you more about what I think about this institution, let's hear from somebody who has actually studied there. And you can explore all of the sessions, including all of our keynotes, on the session pages, details in the description down below. Let's hear from a student right now. Let's shift gears and talk about the life here on campus. Beautiful sunny day here in Sydney. Tons of students out here on this sort of central lawn section. People are sipping on coffees, they're eating lunch, they're chatting, they're reading. What's it like to study here?
So actually, when I am actually studying, it's amazing. I absolutely love the library in Building 2. It is so pretty. So I reckon it's got the best library in Sydney. And then when I want to chill out a bit, I mean, Sydney's an amazing place for a start, but UTS has such a convenient location. So it's so close to Central. Get on a train, get on a ferry to Manly. I've done that a couple of times where I just went from uni, brought my surfboard in, went to Manly, had a bit of fun time there, came back here. And then all the cafes and places, they're great. So there's a cafe kind of diagonally behind us that does $2 coffees at 2 p.m. and live off that a bit. Yeah, and I love this green. The area we're sitting on now is such a good community space. Sometimes they get the deck chairs out and you just sunbathe, you just have a little nap and you photosynthesize. Yeah, and then when you're ready, you get back on the grinds and you feel really refreshed. And yeah, there's such good seating areas. It's really, really an ideal place.
Now, of course, that's just one perspective. Every student's experience is going to be different. But it's also always interesting to hear about what students say about their particular experience. So I think there are three things that really define UTS. Let's get into those right now. The first is the applied learning model. This university was literally created as a university of technology. That wasn't just a branding exercise, but from day one, the curriculum has really been built around practical, hands-on learning. And so when you're talking about engineering, students, what we're talking about here is engineering students working on real industry projects, nursing students in clinical simulation suites, communication students producing real media. Almost every program at UTS bakes in some form of work-integrated learning. Internships, placements, capstone projects with actual companies. This isn't something they bolted on later to make students seem employable. It's really built into the DNA of the place. Now, the second is the design and creative technology culture at UTS. UTS has a genuine reputation in design, architecture, media, creative industries that goes beyond what you'd expect from a university with technology in the name. The Faculty of Design, Architecture and Building and the communication programs attract students who think visually, who want to make things, who want to work at the intersections of technology and creativity. The TD School, that's the Transdisciplinary Innovation School, is one of the few academic units in the country specifically designed to get students from different disciplines collaborating communicating on complex real-world problems. And that's unusual, but also incredibly valuable for a student looking to get experience in real-world situations. The third, and this should be no surprise to anyone, is UTS's location. It sits in what's called the Tech Central Precinct near Central Station in Sydney. This is Sydney's emerging innovation hub with tech companies, startups and creative studios right on its doorstep. For students who want part-time work in their fields, who want to be able to get jobs and have employment options, as well as great transport connections, being in the heart of the city has some serious advantages that suburban campuses simply can't offer. You're also being close to employment options, and when I mean that, I mean employers, so being able to get involved in things like networking activities and other things outside the classroom in a professional setting, which may be harder to come across in other institutions. Now, that location factor connects to something really practical. If you're a domestic student, you're likely going to be studying under the HEX Help scheme. That's the Australian government's loan scheme, where you don't pay your tuition fees up front, and in fact the government subsidises the cost of your education. You don't pay your contribution up front, you pay it back as part of your tax through the tax system once you're earning above a certain threshold. So your tuition isn't the budget problem, but living costs in inner Sydney, that's where we're talking roughly $600 to $900 a week for food, rent, transport, and everything else that's worth factoring in. It's expensive. And if cost is a concern, I would check out the Australian Government Support for University Studies session and Mandy Money's School Leavers Money Essentials session, both of which are available right now on the Expo platform, and both will help you understand what financial support is available and how to manage your money better. All right, let's talk about what UTS is academically strong at, because in fact, the reach of this institution is probably wider than you might actually expect. The university offers around 130 undergraduate programs and over 200 postgraduate programs across 9 faculties and schools. The biggest enrolment clusters are in engineering and IT, business and health. But the university has well-regarded programs in law, communication, science, education and design as well. In engineering and IT, UTS has invested heavily in specialist infrastructure, and the engineering building on Broadway is absolutely state-of-the-art. Incredible facilities there for students. The tech lab out at Botany is something a little bit different you wouldn't have seen or heard of before perhaps, and it's a large-scale industrial research facility where engineering researchers work on projects in things like defence, space, advanced manufacturing and robotics. Students can be doing their capstone projects, and research degrees get access to the kind of equipment that other people might only be able to dream about. This isn't just a showroom, like this is the real cutting edge equipment that you need to understand for the future of technology. Let's talk about health. UTS runs one of the largest nursing programs in the state, and the health simulation suites let students practice clinical skills before they ever touch a real patient, and they are really exceptional. Pharmacy, midwifery and allied health are all strong here too. Now, the communication and media programs are really a standout. UTS has produced a disproportionate number of Australian journalists, filmmakers and media professionals. Its proximity to the ABC, just across the road, is obviously an advantage. If you're thinking about a career in media, honestly, this is one of the universities that you need to look at really seriously. On the research side, UTS hit a record $127 million in external research income in 2024. Every single field assessed in the most recent National Research Audit, that's the ERA, or Excellence in Research for Australia, was rated at world standard, at or above world standard. So just to talk about that for a second, universities in their different research areas get basically compared against what research has turned out across the world. If a university is rated at world standard or above world standard, that means the university is doing a great job in creating cutting edge research in that area. So institutions like UTS, where they're rating at world standard or above in all of their areas, means that this is an academically and research driven institution of excellence. So UTS's research strengths cluster around health and medical innovation, data science and AI, sustainability, and social justice. The Institute for Sustainable Futures and the Jumbunna Institute for Indigenous Education and Research are both nationally significant organisations. And in AI and technology, if those are careers that interest you, and you should be thinking about AI if nothing else, it's definitely worth checking out the session we're bringing you on studying with AI and AI and the futures of work. They're presented by the University of New England later on during the Expo, and they're going to talk about how AI is impacting different career areas. Really important for you to get across, and actually links in really well with UTS, which does have a real strength in terms of technology and AI, cyber, and all of these sorts of things. Now, one thing that I'd really like to flag honestly with you about UTS is that it's been having some challenges lately. Back at the end of 2025, it announced quite a significant restructure, and the university announced plans to cut around 400 staff to save about $100 million annually. It's also suspended intakes, i.e. it has cut, or is in the process of cutting, over 100 degrees from 2026 onwards. Now, I want to really call this out because it's not all that it seems, okay? Firstly, it's partly in a response to sector-wide funding pressures that affect lots of Australian universities. It doesn't mean that the university is in crisis, but it does mean some programs may look a little bit different or be less available than they were in previous years. Now, honestly, when universities are cutting degrees, and we see this in the media all the time, a lot of it is kind of like media hype. Often, degrees are simply being cut because they haven't got many students enrolled or they're not being used anymore. So rather than having lots more degrees on the books, universities trim them away and consolidate them into larger degree centres. So if it's a degree in communications with a subspecialty in, typing, the fact that it had 3 students enrolled and the university has decided to consolidate that and cut that degree actually is meaningless to you. So don't believe the media hype that just because an institution is restructuring or cutting degrees, that it's necessarily a dramatic thing. Now, that said, UTS has had some challenges. It has some financial pressures, and that does flow through to staffing. What you'll find is that your educational experience will still be excellent. Your educational experience may not be impacted in any way whatsoever. However, when it comes to administration and other things, that can be impacted in some ways by a university restructure. So I do think it's worth checking your specific degree to see if there have been any changes proposed before you put in your application. For the most part, I don't think restructures and the trimming and tidying up of degree programs is as big a deal as people make out, but always, of course, worth looking into some of the details. Now, UTS isn't a member of the Group of 8. Group of 8 is the consolidated grouping of Australia's leading, most prestigious, that's what they call themselves, most prestigious research-intensive institutions. But it does consistently outperform several of the Group of 8 universities when it comes to things like employer satisfaction in some industry engagement metrics. The thing about rankings, these rankings tell you about research output and historical prestige in many cases, but they don't always tell you how well a university prepares you for actual employment. And we're going to get into more of that in just a moment. But this is a good moment just to remind you about the other keynotes that we have going on. There's a whole week full of sessions, 90 sessions as part of this virtual expo. You can find all those details in the description below. Once again, any questions, make sure you drop them in the chat and I will try to get to them in this session. If not in the session, then definitely in the Discord group afterwards. Okay. Before I jump into those numbers and we talk about rankings and we talk about, student satisfaction and the like, let's get the perspective of another student who's studied at UTS. Right, well, let's get to the numbers. And these numbers come from the quality indicators for learning and teaching, the QUILT dataset from the Australian government. It's a student survey that happens every year and looks at a whole range of metrics, how universities are performing across things like student satisfaction, employer outcomes, and the like. When it comes to student satisfaction, UTS sits at 76.9%. based on the QUILT Student Experience Survey. That puts it a little bit below the national average, and for a top 100 globally ranked university, to me it's a bit of a point of tension. It suggests that while the university is doing well on research and metrics and global reputation, the day-to-day student experience probably has some room to improve. To be honest, it's not unusual for an urban, like city centre university that does a lot of research, similar to UNSW in Sydney, but it's worth knowing. Teaching quality also tracks in a similar sort of range. Students generally rate UTS's teaching positively in applied and practical subjects, but the overall scores don't really stand out from the pack. It's kind of mid-pack when it comes to teaching and learning. Graduate employment is at 77.5% for domestic undergraduates who are in full-time work within 4 months of finishing their degree. That's slightly below the national average. And here's where the context really matters. 3 years out, so not 4 months out, 3 years out, that number is above 90%. So a slow start is pretty common for graduates in fields that are creative, in media, design fields, where freelance and portfolio careers take longer to register as full-time employment. It doesn't mean that UTS graduates are struggling. It means that the survey methodology doesn't capture their career path as well at the 4-month mark as at a future point, years down the track. Now, let's talk about graduate starting salaries for a moment. And once again, we're talking about the median here being around $70,000. That, of course, doesn't apply to every degree area. Some will be much higher, some will be lower. That 70,000 figure for UTS is right on the sector average. It's not the highest, it's not the lowest. What it reflects is UTS's broad mix of programs, the high-earning engineers and IT graduates balanced against the lower starting salaries in the creative industries and communication. All right, we can end up with a band. Let's talk about global rankings. Once again, as we've said before, UTS ranks in the top 100 in the world. It was 96th in QS's global rankings. And that puts it about 9th in Australia, which is a fantastic result, just outside the group of 8. In the Times Higher Ed survey, it's actually equal 8th nationally. So it's kind of part of the group of 8, not that it's part of the group of 8. And for a university that's only existed since 1988, these results are absolutely remarkable. UTS is the highest ranked Australian university under 50 years old. But bear in mind, these rankings measure things like research citations, academic reputation, and international diversity. They don't directly measure the teaching quality or how well you'll be prepared for a job. But they do signal that UTS's research output and global profile are growing and growing fast. Now, you can compare these numbers side by side with any other university on the Choosing Your Uni platform. It's one of the most useful tools that we've built. Our whole platform is just about helping you figure out what to study and where based on your interests, goals, and preferences. It's free, takes less than a minute to join. Details down below or at choosingyouruni.com. Okay, now, this is the one question that I get asked a lot. If I was going to be choosing UTS or comparing UTS against another institution, who would I compare it against? Now, first and foremost, of course, it depends for what field of study. But let's look broadly across the board which institutions you might consider as being comparable. Firstly, in terms of a geographic comparison, the Uni of New South Wales, which is also a large research-intensive inner Sydney institution, is a good comparison point. UNSW ranks higher globally than UTS and probably has a stronger brand recognition in some traditional professions like law and medicine. But UTS often matches or even beats UNSW on industry engagement and practical learning. So the question there is about whether you value prestige and research tradition or applied hands-on education. And to be honest, UNSW is a very applied institution as well, much more so than something like the University of Sydney. So these two universities, definitely worth comparing, and they genuinely compete hard for similar students in Sydney. Looking outside of Sydney for a moment, a little bit of a curveball for you. If you're looking for that inner city environment, to me, a couple of the institutions you should really look at are RMIT University in Melbourne, QUT University in Perth, even Swinburne University in Melbourne as well is a good one. And nowadays, Edith Cowan University in Perth with its brand new city campus is really a strong choice when it comes to the creative industries. These campuses have something in common with UTS. They're right in the hearts of their cities. They're highly connected to their industries and they have strong reputations in things like technology and creative industries as well. So those are certainly worth a look. Back in Sydney, if we're looking for one that's a little bit less obvious, but also often a common choice for students, looking at Macquarie University. Macquarie, obviously a traditional suburban campus, beautiful green outdoor spaces, less probably stress and hustle and bustle than UTS in the city centre, but also sits in a similar ranking band to UTS. It's strong in business and technology, offers a genuinely different campus experience and a lower cost of living because you can live further out west and get access with a little bit less difficulty. So I think Macquarie is also worth a look. Now finally, the last point of comparison, I'd look at Australian Catholic University as well. If we're talking about education and we're talking about health, we're talking about allied health, nursing, these are areas where ACU is super strong. It's a smaller institution, it has high student satisfaction in those areas, and it has multiple sites. So in terms of you potentially accessing that institution, it might be a little bit closer to home and easier to get to. So ACU is certainly worth a look in that regard. We've got sessions on all those institutions, and you can find the timings and details about those on the sessions page for choosing your uni. So check those out down below. And if you've got specific questions about all of these institutions, we're out of time for this session. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to your live questions. However, I will take each and every one of those questions and I will add it to Discord about UTS, and I promise you that I will answer every single question. So that concludes this session on UTS Sydney. Thank you for joining me once again. Lots more great sessions to come as part of the Virtual Expo. I'm Rob Malicki. Hope you have yourself a great day if you're not coming to any other sessions today. See you next time. Well, I hope you got something out of this session. And if you have any questions at all, you can head to choosingyouruni.com and ask Lumen. Lumen is your AI guide who knows about every university, every pathway, every option that we've talked about throughout this Virtual Expo. And Lumen is available to talk to you 24/7. So it's ready when you are.